Hey everyone, and welcome back to the World of Warcraft news. Do you know what? Today it's a very, I'd say, state of the game type of episode because there's been an absolute torrent of news that's happened on beta. Some is dramatic, some is quite good. It's all very interesting. Of course, quick thing, we're nearing the end of the month, so over on Patreon it is Monk Month, and you'll get a bunch of things like the Monk class pin, a bunch of Eastern themed art for your walls, and the super cute dragon bookmark. I mean, it even peeks up over your pages. It's very cute. Okay. Patrons, thank you for all your support. And with that said, let's get stuck in. Alright, first order of business, and apologies for the amount of housekeeping at the start of the video. Blizzard have given me 100 betas to give away. They're not keys. Winners will be picked on the 31st of August, and then Blizzard will manually flag accounts for access on the 3rd of September. Full terms are below in the description of the video. Technically, I believe Blizzard has sponsored me by giving me the keys, but there's no financial relationship there. So yeah, what I want to do though is for you to tell me what you're interested in the most in Shadowlands, what's drawing you in the most, be it classes, covenants, Torghast, loot changes, whatever it is. So to be eligible, follow the link down below, let me know, and once that's done, I'll collate all the data and we'll be able to work out basically what are the parts of Shadowlands' feature set that are actually really resonating with people. So a fun giveaway, and also we'll get some interesting data out of it too. And then for our first main news item, we've got a very interesting situation where Blizzard basically, as Wowhead I think quite rightly put it, they have put a progressive taxation on secondary stats. Now, this is a very interesting thing. This is actually Blizzard taking, I think, one of the largest attempts that they've ever made to solve a problem that has really, I think it's just hurt the game so much whenever we've been in the era of expansions having a large item level bloat. And that's really happened since the kind of like new raid system came in. So basically the way it works, right, is whenever your secondary stat rating is from 0% to 25%, there's no penalty. However, from 25% to 35%, you actually get a 10% penalty. Then from 34 to 42, it's a 20% penalty. From 42 to 49, there's a 30% penalty. And from 49 to 106% ratings, there's a 40% penalty. So just like some of those higher tax brackets. And you cannot get more than 106% of a secondary stat rating from just gear alone. So remember those level 101 twinks that I love doing in Legion where you could get insane amounts of haste? That stuff like that's basically dead. But in general, I think we can all see why Blizzard are trying to do this, because what happens is item level, goes up like this a lot during an expansion. And with that, all your secondaries go up a lot as well. And that ends up at the stage where by the end of an expansion, our characters are mega, mega, mega powerful. Now, it also means that as your item level increases, just the gulf in power between players begins to get super, super, super ridiculous. More so than it really historically had been in the past. So I think you can see that this is really Blizzard trying to fix that problem in a systemic way, such that by the time we hit maybe patch 9.3, we don't have crazy ratings that are, I think, sometimes brushing up against class design, right? Like sometimes you can actually just get so much haste that your class begins to function a bit wackily. I certainly had that experience playing a Windwalker Monk at sometimes, and certainly as any Legion Paladins, with Running Crusade as the repetitive strain disorder, whatever, injury, that's it. They probably got, Sonic's class design can get loopy at super high ratings. Now, this really does remind me of something Blizzard did in Legion, where I think for the first few months of Legion, the secondary stats were really increasing quite quickly, and then they just implemented some sort of nerf. I think, was it around patch 7.1? I forget exactly, but they did something like that. Now, there is a fun thing here in people sort of drawing a parallel to a progressive tax, because, in the same way that if you have the money to afford an accountant, you can do better in taxation. Well, if you've got money to, hire a statistics accountant, such as raid bots, then you're going to be better here, because this kind of will mess up a little bit with stat priorities and things like that, because you'll begin to get those diminishing returns, like if you just try to stack haste into oblivion. So that's basically what's going on here. It's certainly something where I can absolutely see why Blizzard have decided to do this. I think in many ways it does make sense. I don't really have a good temperature of what people actually think about it. I'll say right now, there's a little bit of me that's like, oh yeah, a big system is being implemented to solve a problem. And then to me, I kind of think, well, item level bloat is kind of insane. Is that maybe the problem? But I think for the sort of scope of what they can do, maybe it's just a situation where Blizzard started testing based on where they are now with Shadowlands, and maybe they try to scry ahead to higher item levels to see how their systems and Covenant stuff would all scale. And maybe they just realized, hang on, we're actually, our course is set for a problem here by the time we hit 9.2, so let's be proactive. So that's, I think, what's going on. Of course, I'd love to hear what you've got to say about it. Next, though, there is another little bit of drama. So, of course, Covenant bonuses being active in dungeons has been a bit of news lately. And a lot of people's thought there is that they're just worried, if they are a Night Fae and there's maybe one spot left in the pre-made group finder for a particular dungeon, that if they're not the right Covenant to use maybe that dungeon special thing because nobody else in that pre-made group has it, that they'll be declined their spot. And what those people will generally instantly call back to is whenever Ian Hazzikostas talked to Preach. And one of the things that Ian said was they never want a situation where somebody is declined a group because of their Covenant choice. Now, to many people, they then see this in dungeons and, they make Curb Your Enthusiasm memes about it. And I think that does make actually quite a bit of sense. I do entirely understand why people are really sort of not happy about this stuff. And it does tie into the ongoing pull the ripcord movement, which we're going to cover in a bit more depth once we properly get our thoughts together. But pull the ripcord is basically, again, echoing what Ian said, where Ian basically said, look, if this all gets too much and it's impossible for us to do it right, we can pull the ripcord on, the Covenant stuff being sort of so tied to the gameplay mechanics. Now, the main update for this in today's story is now that we've got a max level testing realm and stuff like that happening, has been confirmed that those Covenant bonuses are going to be active in your Mythic Plus dungeons as well. And that does mean, and we did assume that, but yeah, it does mean if you're pushing keys, you absolutely will want somebody in your party to be of a Covenant that gives you bonuses in that dungeon. Now, the way that it's been designed so far, it really will only have to be one person in your party. Of course, there are 5 people who can be in a party in WoW, and there are 4 Covenants. So chances are you'll be covered anyway, but there absolutely will be some cases where, yeah, you'll be out of luck, and maybe you'll want to swap a player around so that you have the Covenant covered. So that's what's up there. More on that later, though. Next up, we've got something that I think has disappointed people. I think it's actually, once you kind of get the technical side of things, a bit obvious what's went on. But to go into it, right, ray tracing. It is the big shiz of graphics right now, and basically it's a pretty incredible thing that computer hardware is now at the stage where we can trace rays, and we can use that for for getting realistic lighting and reflections and shadows. And there's so many games that it looks absolutely stunning on. Now, many people saw that ray tracing, the NVIDIA RTX stuff, was coming to World of Warcraft Shadowlands. They got extremely excited. And I think many people will have thought of maybe those Unreal Engine 4, mock-ups that people have done of WoW zones and just, got really hyped about it. Now, in reality, what's happened is we've got ray-traced shadows. Now, ray-traced shadows are, I believe, one of the easier things to do when you're working with ray tracing. And basically, the shadows are a little bit softer, a bit more realistic, and that's basically it. The frame rate hit is certainly pretty high, and I think this is a situation where player expectations may have actually just been way too high in this, because maybe they've seen, RTX branding and marketing pushing games that are just using sort of the full sort of functionality of ray tracing a lot more. So many people will have expected RTX to actually mean better lit textures, more realistic lighting, reflections. Maybe they will have thought, wow, all of my spell effects will be reflecting perfectly off the shiny floor. And that is really cool. And I entirely understand why people will have thought that they could have been getting something like that. But from the more implementation perspective there, I'm fairly sure that getting the current game to work with all of that would mean the Blizzard would have to make a lot of technical changes. As an example, they would need to update all of their materials. Now, to understand materials in the context of game engine stuff, I am sure that there's like a Unity or Unreal Engine, Material 101. That's a quick YouTube search away if you wanted to go and do some independent research there. But that's like one example of something that I think, if WoW was always designed never to have that style or that type of lighting, that, just slapping on ray trace lighting wouldn't really work so well. So yes, basically there's a lot of old stuff with the WoW engine that they would need to work through, I think, to get full RTX going. And the thing there to remember is that game engines are fairly modular. So ray tracing is being used for shadows right now, but the way that it will work is that shadows will probably be able to operate fairly independently from a bunch of other things. So yeah, you can have ray trace shadows, but other aspects they don't have to be ray traced. So I think there's a little bit of unrealistic expectations here, but equally speaking, I don't think you can expect people to have that technical understanding. I think that would be unfair. And I do think Blizzard should have probably set more realistic expectations here. As I said, did people think we'd suddenly have, Unreal Engine 4 mock-up looking WoW? Now, really, for the feature itself, look, it's not worth the performance hit. It doesn't really look that much better. And to be honest with you, I don't even think that using ray tracing in a game like World of Warcraft makes that much sense, given World of Warcraft's reliance on a very established art style. And I do think that mixing what WoW has always looked like with then photorealistic elements could really just kind of lead to a clash of styles that can make the artist sad. Anyway, that's the ray tracing situation. Next up, let's get into beta. Alright, this is great news. Blizz have opened a max level testing realm. We were really scared when level 60 pre-mades left the beta recently, but they're back. And while the realm is called Torghast, it is actually an endgame content testing realm. It is complete with vendors to shortcut endgame systems, all conduits, all legendaries, fully unlocked soulbinds, the whole thing that you will need to test pretty much whatever the hell you want to do. Thank you. Wow, thank you, Blizzard. I mean, back in BFA, we had a PvP realm that did have max level pre-mades, but they couldn't leave the Borealis arena, and that meant they couldn't even do target dummies. This is infinitely better than how it was in Battle for Azeroth, and that certainly is good. And I would also say that this max level testing realm, along with the current bunch of 50 to 60 testing, really does indicate we're at that stage where Shadowlands is basically just polishing itself to release candidate. That truly is what I think is happening. And I mean, yeah, that's not too surprising to me. I mean, come on, pre-patches hit PTR, it's probably going to be out in maybe a calendar month from when I've made this video, and Shadowlands will probably only be a month behind that. So there you go, pretty interesting stuff. Let's get into a few changes though. Blizzard have implemented something that I really didn't see coming actually. So they've changed up raid loot. Instead of getting direct raid drops for weapons, shields, and offhands, you now get a token, and you can then take that token back to your Covenant. Now that's really interesting because the tokens themselves are broken down on a class basis, right? In the same way that it used to be with like your set piece tokens back in the day. So, maybe it'll be like, Death Knight and 3 other classes will share tokens, and that's how Blizzard will balance the drops amongst the different raid bosses. This is a big ass change, a really big one. So the reason why is because many classes, right, they have multiple specs. Sometimes those specs will use different weapon types. Now there are situations like, say, with Frost Death Knight, where, yes, they can have dual wield and do a two-hander, but there's other classes who, won't have a situation like that. And for those people, it's pretty cool. They can just get a token from a boss, and they can get a weapon for whatever spec they want. Now, if we're going to the, back in the days of doing main spec rolls and off-spec rolls, it would be kind of funny doing a main spec roll for something and sneakily going back to your Covenant and redeeming it for like an off-spec piece. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, basically that's what's going on. And I think my main read from this, though, is that if this is extended to the weekly chest, and I do believe it is extended to the weekly chest, then instead of from your weekly chests, getting a particular weapon, you will get a weapon token of a given item level from your weekly chest. And I think that really will increase the chance of actually getting what you want. So that's, yeah, I think that's actually pretty exciting. I don't see major issues with it now. And also, just a nice thing I noticed, I think item level 200 is one of the base ones. It's almost, I think, the lower bound of epics in this expansion, which is just like Wrath of the Lich King, which is a little bit nostalgic to me. And next up, class changes. Oh my god, there have been so many. I'm going to try to go through them quick. The good news is it actually does represent a good wave of polishing. So, Demon Hunters, right. You've had Azerite traits be baselined. Furious Gaze, the haste increase after I-Beam, is baseline level 58. And then Revel in Pain, the Fiery Brand duration increase, Azerite trait is at level 56. But that's not all, because Nemesis is gone, because people didn't really use it that much. It's now replaced in the tree by a buffed up Fel Barrage, and where Fel Barrage was, we now have a new spell called Glaive Tempest that launches 2 glaives doing damage over 3 seconds to all nearby, to nearby enemies. And yeah, it's a new AoE spender, costs 20 Fury, was nerfed after they put it live, but yeah, there you go. Overall, I mean, there's still some issues there, but my initial impressions are, okay, cool, more talent diversity, that seems interesting. I definitely look forward to trying it out. So there's that. Next up for the Warlocks, you guys get one cool thing and a nice change. So, Ritual of Doom, very thematic spell. It's back at level 37. So you, along with 4 other players, can do your sacrificial summoning in of a Doom Guard for up to 15 seconds. But of course, that Doom Guard can break free and be hostile at any moment in those 15 minutes. So quite fun. Then also Fear has a new rank that gives it no spell pushback at level 52. And, this is the big one, Curse of Recklessness is gone. And basically, Curse of Recklessness, it had some throughput implications that basically meant loads of locks felt like it was mandatory and really not that fun, and it meant they couldn't use their other curses. So Blizzard have decided that really Curse of Recklessness wasn't doing what a curse should be doing, and they've decided to remove it, which for the Warlocks will open up some choices for you. Then next up, Rogues. You've had things happen. Subtlety Rogues. They've got a new passive that causes them to automatically cast Slice and Dice whenever they Shadow Strike, when a Shadow Strike hits a target from stealth. And that basically cuts down GCDs in their opener, I believe, which should feel a bit more smooth. Then for Outlaw, you have seen Dreadblades, the Legion artifact ability, return. The way it works, right, is when it's active, each combo generator that you use will totally fill your combo bar, but at the cost of some health. So you get that and a decent roll of bones, and you are off to the races at maximum speed. Next up, though, I can't believe this. Feral Druids have got a good change. Incredible. So, Berserk, the untalented version, will make it so that your Shred and your Rake do damage as if you were stealthed, and it makes it such that finishers will refund 2 combo points. Now this is basically a big increase in pace and damage and basically fun over the existing baseline version of that spell. Then Shred will also generate an extra combo point when it's used from stealth, which of course will extend to the aforementioned upgrade to baseline Berserk. So hey, we're kind of getting somewhere. Berserk might actually be fun by default. But then your Incarnation, which normally gives you the super buffed up version of Berserk, well, it still, lasts for 30 seconds, it gives you all the Berserk effects, and it gives you the energy cost reduction. So basically, as you can see here, Blizz have swapped things around to make the baseline Berserk feel a bit more impactful, but still have the Incarnation one, of course, be very good for your throughput and the pace as well. And also Shred and Rake stealth damage has been rebalanced to make these changes work, and while there is still a bit of iffiness around the Blood Talon stuff, I will say that this change in isolation seems far better, and I'd say is pretty welcome. Then for the Frost DKs, you've had something interesting that addresses a concern that many people had. So what's actually happened is the Might of the Frozen Wastes will make your Obliteration and Frost Strike hit with your offhand as well when you're dual wielding, and also will let you Rune Forge both of your weapons. And that seems pretty powerful, but they've also adjusted Runic Attenuation to have its proc rate be adjusted. And the point here is that Blizzard's goal is to balance dual wielding and having a single two-hander, because basically they want having a single two-hander to make up for you not having an additional Rune Forge, because of course, if you're dual wielding one-handers, you can Rune Forge both. So that's something that they're working on for the Frost DKs, ideally in the name of just everything being good and balanced. Then for the Unholies out there, Soul Reaper's been reworked. It's now an execute, so it does damage, it leaves a debuff for 8 seconds. When that expires, if the target is alive and below 35% health, then boom, it will explode for damage, and if the target dies with it, then you will get Runic Corruption. The next up, a GCD-like change. Unholy Frenzy has been reworked, and it's now called Unholy Strike. It's an attack that does damage and then gives you 4 wounds in the target and increases your haste by 15% for 12 seconds. So basically here, right, what they've done is they've kind of turned an offensive cooldown into an attack. So at least now, yeah, you'll still be invoking the global cooldown, but you'll actually be doing an attack and generating some wounds on your target. And then also they've reduced the cost of Army of the Dead. And basically they overall wanted to reduce startup time with specific talents and improve flow. And it seems like that'll basically accomplish that. Next up, though, for the Shadow Priests, we all know that they've had their big rework, and essentially here, to cut a long story short, there's just continued balancing. So Legacy of the Void now has ramping haste, and it hooks into Devouring Plague, with Void Bolt extending its duration, and Blizzard said that yes, this should be a viable way to play, and it will allow for some of the old designs feel, so I think that's kind of cool. Past that, though, balancing is just ongoing, including toning down Void Bolt's CD extending, rebalancing, dot healing, and a few other things. I don't want to get super into the weeds here, because basically the point is they're very much still honing it in, and I think it's a pretty good, successful design, so I'm keen to see where that goes. Prot Warrior. You guys have had a lot of complaints, I'd say rightly so, given how some fun synergies went away. What Blizzard have done is they've reshuffled talents. Now, what makes Prot Warrior so strong for AoE on live is a combination of talents, Azerite, and essences. It's essentially synergy out of control, and it's super powerful. Now, the Shadowlands changes killed that dead by throwing basically all the good talents onto the same row, so you can only have one of them. So they've reverted a bit of that, and they've also shifted damage to revenge instead of them just remaining, these thunderclap machines. Now look, they still will feel like shadows of their former selves. There are a ton of nerfs that impact gameplay feel as well as numbers. So this is basically a shuffle that puts a bunch of the same use case talents into the same row. The major changes are things like Devastator on the first row will now feel like just a lot more free to pick. The AoE talents are now together in 2 rows. Survivability talents are also together in a row. And then another big change here is that Bolster is going onto the last row. Now, that is kind of where it belongs strength-wise, but it will lock out some pretty strong stuff, and not being able to take both Anger Management and Bolster will sort of feel like a heavy enough nerf to them. Basically, it seems like this solves a bunch of balance issues, and it brings back a little bit of the gameplay synergy that 8.3 Prot loved so much, but it's nowhere near as strong. They do feel a lot slower, and that opens up some more general issues with shield blocks, general downtime, and of course, the Ignore Pain nerf from Battle for Azeroth, which is still a thing. Now, these changes are actually improvements, I would say, on earlier builds, but there are balance issues between talents that still remain, sadly, like Indomitable being just too good, and a bit too good, and Booming Voice kind of being much the same. So, hopefully Blizzard aren't done here. These were good changes in the right direction, but I think most Prot Warriors, the dedicated ones, would want a little more to be done. Alright, let's take a hard break from that and talk about Relics of the Past. And this is an interesting new crafting item that solves an age-old problem. So Relics of the Past are a new item. There are 5 ranks of them, and each rank will set the item level of a bit of gear and the required level to actually use it to a set amount. And this works for crafted gear. As an example, it could set the item level of a bit of gear to 23 and make it usable at level 15, or the item level to be 100 and the item to be usable at level 50, which would be great for starting off leveling in Shadowlands. Now, these Relics of the Past are created using crafting materials from past expansions, and basically what this means is that crafted gear can actually remain relevant to you as you level up. Now, that max item level of 100 and level 50, that's like, I think, normal Nyalotha, so great for getting started as you head into Shadowlands. And I think this is really good for the RPG side of the game. I mean, I think loads of us had that fantasy, right, of picking skinning and leatherworking on your hunter and making your own gear as you leveled, but it never really worked out that well. But now what can happen is somebody could level up their character and their professions at the same time, and they could use these Relics of the Past to keep that gear being relevant to them. So I've got to wonder as well, like, that's pretty cool from a fantasy perspective, but could this be good for, like, old expansion gear markets, old expansion material markets, like, say, quickly getting a new leveling character set up with heirlooms and crafted gear, and that crafted gear, like, being able to be upgraded, that would be like an optimal way to level. So is that going to be like a new little market that will open up? Certainly an interesting thing. With that said, let's move on though, because we've got to talk about the Great Vault. Basically, now that raid testing has been going on and the Great Vault's been in the game, people have done some raids and they found out a little bit more of how the Great Vault actually works. Now, the Great Vault is your new weekly chest in this expansion, and you'll see the categories of raiding, Mythic Plus, and PvP. Each category has got 3 different slots, and each one of those slots is unlocked progressively by doing more and more within that activity. So, earning conquest points, doing mythic dungeons, and killing bosses. It will unlock more gear for each one of those slots. And then, of course, the actual quality of the item is not based on how much you've done. It will be based, of course, on, say, your PvP rating, how far you push your keys, and the difficulty of the raids you are doing. But what happened is that people, of course, were doing some raid testing, and you can see the raid gear is appearing in the slots, and that's basically how it works. Now, what that basically means is, let's just say you're a raider, you kill however many bosses it is in a week to unlock all 3 slots, and then what will happen is, whenever it's the end of the week and you get to choose, that'll be that. You can choose which one of those 3 things you want. Now, of course, if you also did some PvP or some Mythic Plus, you'll be able to choose from just 1 bit of gear from anything that is in the Great Vault. Now, I think this is way better. So, Yes, you only get one bit of gear, and it is the case right now that, you know, you could get a bit of gear from your Mythic Plus chest, a bit of gear from your PvP chest. Certainly this is great for the raiders, but yeah, now it's all in one chest. Now, what I would say is that if you combine one of the stories we had earlier, where you get weapon, offhand, and shield tokens from the raid, so you got, you know, you'll have tokens in here, which will cover all those slots, and then just getting stuff from the loot tables of the raid, I mean, you get 3 shots at that. The chances of you being able to pick something you actually want versus, you know, something that's totally useless, I mean, yeah, you're getting less loot now than if you filled every single, you know, weekly box in BFA, but the chances of it being loot that you'll actually want and actually be able to use is way higher. And of course, Blizzard are doing a fallback system where if there's nothing you want in it, then yeah, you can get some currency that will be relevant to you. Now, I'll say this. Personally, I can be a sucker for things like this, for really just being like, oh, I want to unlock my weekly box to get my big bing bing wahoo happy moment at the start of next week. But the problem was that what was supposed to be this big happy moment turned into the box of disappointment, as we are all so familiar. I probably meet less than most people because I mean, for me, the glass shattered is the way to put that, and I just stopped caring, which is really sad to say. But with a system like this, I mean, I'm far more likely to engage with it because I understand how it works. I understand that I have a choice. I'll be able to weigh things in my favor, and that no matter what, I'm going to get a currency that will be useful to my character. And certainly for me, even though I'm suspicious of just having, you know, weekly carrot and sticks to actually get you playing the game, if we are going to do one, I think this is one that will, to be honest with you, hook into my brain chemistry more successfully than the other ones. So I guess there's that. Now, while there technically is less gear being flung out here, and, you know, there's less gear coming from Mythic Plus, also as an example, just less gear drops in general, you should remember that gear is less common in Shadowlands than it is in past expansions, or at least recent ones, and that's to balance out there being no Titan Forging rolls. So to me, if I've got this weekly box that feels more respectful of my time, and I have less gear that matters more, tell you what, that is a recipe for me looking at my character sheet and thinking, cool, I care about that. And I've not been able to say that for the last 2 expansions. So take that for what it is. I think it's a pretty major statement. Certainly from my own perspective, it's got me a lot more excited. And then to round us off, quick bit about legendaries. So we've now found out that you can craft legendaries at 4 different ranks. There's item level 90, item level 210, 225, and 235. Rank 1, item level 190, costs 100 soul ash, while each successive rank costs 100 more soul ash than the last. And you might be thinking, what the hell's a soul ash? Well, basically, if you do your 2 sort of Torghast things per week, you'll get 100 soul ash. To cut a long story short. Now, you mightn't be able to like achieve that perfectly in like week 1 of the expansion, but eventually you will just be getting 100 soul ash a week. And I'd say if you're really trying to push it hard, you will be able to get 100 like as soon as you get into Torghast. So that's what's going on there. Now, my big question here is there going to be a legendary item level upgrade item like we have had in the past, or will you have to forge a new one from scratch? Because I mean, just the decision making there is going to be quite challenging. Personally, I imagine that people will want to rush like a 200 ash cost legendary, just, you know, one with a decent item level, but more importantly, so they get the effect that they actually need. And then maybe they'll go for the super higher item level ones later. I mean, Castle Nathria will probably release, you know, like a month or whatever after the expansion launches. It's what Blizzard have done recently, right? So that probably means you could get 4 baby legendaries at 190, 2 decent ones, or maybe 1 maxed out legendary. So that's kind of what's going on there. Of course, all those numbers are subject to change, and personally, I'll be very interested to see if there is any form of upgrade item. Then finally, a little bit in sources, and this is more because, I mean, I'll be real, I was scrolling Wowhead, I saw their, you know, their headline of 4 legendary recipes come from reputations, and then what happened? I thought of Mists of Pandaria. If you want some context there was a situation in Mists where a lot of pretty useful stuff came from reps, and there was a little bit of discontent from the player base on that. But an interesting one. So yeah, there's 4 legendary recipes coming from reps. There's other, you know, legendary recipes coming from other different drops. It seems like the sources are similar enough to some of the things we've seen with essences, so you kind of get the picture there. But there is a big difference. They're account-wide unlocks, yes. So while there's probably discussion to have there about what's ideal, I would also say it probably doesn't matter that much because, yeah, it's not going to experience the problem that really hurt essences, right? Like, this is going to be something that, even if it's a pain in the ass to unlock, you unlock it once and it's just yours for the expansion because it's unlocked account-wide. So I'd like to know, what do you think about that design? I'll say, in my opinion, I think it sure does beat Legion's system of just complete randomness that you had no control over. So, there you go. World of Warcraft news. Interesting things. This progressive, nerf to your secondary stats. Certainly interesting. Big problem being solved, obviously. But is it good? Is it bad? Is it like with taxes, where if you can afford an accountant called RaidBots, you'll actually be able to better manage your secondary stats and have more effectiveness? Kind of tricky to say. It is one of those things. The more complexity in systems that are used to solve other systems, the more it all just gets a bit complicated. But I can see how pragmatically Blizz would want to solve that problem. So let me know what you do think. Of course, another way, if you want to let me know what you think about some Shadowlands stuff and the other things you're the most sort of excited about, or just what parts of the expansion resonated with you, and you also want a chance of getting a beta key, hey, hit up that link down in the description below. And of course, if you want to support us, which really does help, and also get some pretty sweet loot in the process, there is the Patreon too. That's it for me. Thank you very much for watching today's video, and I will see you next time.